March 23, 1945. 10:47 in the morning. Winston Churchill sat in his command aircraft minutes from landing in Germany to observe what was meant to be a moment of British triumph. Field Marshal Montgomery's Operation Plunder, the carefully engineered Rhine crossing, was designed to prove to the world that British forces still stood as the disciplined elite of the Allied coalition. Then the radio crackled for words that froze Churchill in place. Patton crossed last night, not today, not with Montgomery's 1,000 guns and airborne drops last night with a handful of boats and what Patton would later call a band of angry Penions. Montgomery's immediate message to Churchill was only two sentences: American insubordination has turned Allied planning into a farce. Patton must be removed from command at once. What Churchill said next, first to Montgomery, then to his inner circle, and finally in a quiet confession to his physician, would expose the harsh truth about coalition warfare, the cost of pride, and why wars are decided by those willing to choose outcomes over procedure. To grasp Churchill's impossible dilemma, you must first understand what Montgomery had been promised. January 12, 1945. Churchill had personally assured Montgomery that Operation Plunder would stand as the defining moment of Allied victory in Europe, not American improvisation but British professionalism. Montgomery devoted 2 months to planning 2 million men, 25,000 vehicles, 3,500 artillery pieces, airborne operations, smoke screens, the largest river crossing since Normandy. Churchill had invited war correspondents, he arranged photographers, he personally drafted the statement celebrating British military excellence, to be released the instant Montgomery's forces secured the eastern bank. Everything was prepared except George Patton had his own plan. March 22, 10:37. At night, Patton phoned Eisenhower from Luxembourg. Quick update: she crossed the Rhine at Oppenheim, used assault boats. Minimal losses, thought you'd want to know. Eisenhower's reply, preserved in the SAF telephone log, showed his instant grasp of the political disaster. George, please tell me you coordinated this with Montgomery. Patton's answer was pure Patton. Monty's got his own crossing tomorrow, didn't want to burden him with details. Eisenhower hung up and immediately contacted his chief of staff. Get me Churchill. George just created the biggest diplomatic crisis of the war. March 23, 6:18 in the morning. Montgomery received confirmation that American forces had crossed the Rhine 12 hours before Operation Plunder was set to begin. His reaction was recorded by several staff officers. He didn't raise his voice. He went icy. Patton has intentionally undermined Allied strategy to satisfy his ego. This is insubordination at the strategic level. I want him relieved, court-martialed, and sent home today. His chief of staff tried to calm him. Sir, the crossing succeeded. Third Army is expanding the bridgehead. Montgomery cut him off. Success does not matter. Discipline is everything. If Patton is allowed to disregard command authority, we have disorder, not coalition. He immediately drafted a message to Churchill. American general has conducted unauthorized operation violating agreed strategic framework. Request you instruct Eisenhower to relieve Patton immediately. British forces cannot operate alongside commanders who ignore command structure. Churchill received Montgomery's message at 9:15 in the morning, minutes before his aircraft was scheduled to land. His military secretary watched him read it 3 times. What are the facts, sir? Patton crossed at Oppenheim last night. Casualties under 30. Bridgehead secured. He did it without extensive preparation, without Montgomery's approval. Without any approval. Churchill gazed out the aircraft window at Germany below. Montgomery was his chosen general, his protege, the methodical professional who embodied everything Churchill believed about proper military conduct. Yet Patton had just crossed Hitler's final natural barrier before Montgomery could even Begin the political calculation was. Merciless back Montgomery and Churchill would be demanding the dismissal of an American general for moving too fast. Back Patton and Churchill would be undermining British military prestige. Before the entire world, Churchill's aircraft landed at 10:52. Montgomery stood, waiting on the tarmac, rigid posture face set. Churchill descended the stairs and Montgomery saluted Prime Minister. Thank you for coming to witness Operation Plunder. Churchill's response was measured. Field Marshal, I received your message. Walk with me. They stepped away from the assembled staff. Montgomery spoke at once. Prime Minister, I must insist Patton be relieved. His insubordination cannot be tolerated. Churchill raised a hand. Montgomery, I need you to answer one question honestly. If Patton had requested permission to cross at Oppenheim last night, what would you have said? Montgomery did not pause. I would have refused it. Distracts from the main effort. Your main effort, the Allied main effort, as agreed by planners. Churchill stopped planners who gave you 2 months and gave Patton nothing. Bernard, is this about strategy or pride? Montgomery's face reddened. Prime Minister, this is about maintaining command discipline. Churchill's reply was soft but crushing. It's about Patton making you look slow. The words hung in the cold German air. Montgomery tried to respond, but Churchill continued. Bernard, I've defended your methods for 3 years. Careful preparation, overwhelming force, minimal casualties. It's the British way, and it saved thousands of lives. But watching Patton cross the Rhine with boats, while you required 2 months to plan the same operation, forces me to ask difficult questions. Montgomery's voice tightened. Prime Minister, if you're implying American methods are superior, I'm saying American speed achieves results we can no longer match. Churchill faced him directly. The war is ending. Bernard, Germany is collapsing. Every day we spend preparing is a day the Soviets push farther west. Patton understands this. Montgomery answered bitterly. So you're choosing him over me? Churchill shook his head. Choosing to end the war before the Soviets claim all of Europe. That requires speed. We no longer have. What Montgomery did not know was that Churchill had been wrestling with this reality for months. In December 1944, after Patton relieved Bastogne in 72 hours, Churchill wrote in his diary, Patton does in days what takes us weeks. In January, watching Montgomery advance slowly while Patton raced across France, Churchill told his physician, the Americans have learned to move faster than we can think. And now, standing on a German airfield watching Montgomery's elaborate preparations, Churchill accepted the truth. He had been avoiding British military doctrine. The doctrine he defended throughout the war had been overtaken by American operational speed. Montgomery made one last attempt. Prime Minister, if Patton is not punished, you establish a precedent. That command authority is meaningless. Churchill's response became the bluntest assessment of Allied politics ever given. Bernard, you're correct. Patton should face discipline. He broke protocol. He ignored coordination. He made you and the British military establishment appear foolish. But here is what you are missing. If I demand Eisenhower remove Patton, the Americans will ask why, and I will have to explain that we are dismissing their most effective general because he succeeded too quickly without British approval. Do you understand how that sounds? Montgomery began to object, but Churchill went on. The Americans provide 70% of Allied forces. They suffer most of the casualties. They finance this entire war. And their general just proved he can cross the Rhine overnight with minimal preparation, while we require 2 months and 1 million men to do the same. If I demand his removal, I am admitting that British pride outweighs Allied victory. The silence was broken by artillery fire. Operation Plunder had begun. Montgomery's crossing, perfectly planned, was finally underway, yet everyone knew it was no longer the main event. Churchill placed a hand on Montgomery's shoulder. Bernard, you are one of Britain's finest commanders. History will remember your victories, but It will also remember that when the war's final chapter was written, an American general crossed the Rhine first, not because he was better, but because he was willing to gamble everything on speed while we calculated caution. Montgomery murmured. So I've lost. Churchill shook his head. We have all lost something. Bernard, you lost precedence. I lost the belief that British methods still define modern warfare, but we are winning the war. That must be enough. Churchill returned to his aircraft without watching Montgomery's crossing. His military secretary recorded what followed. The Prime Minister sat in total silence for 20 minutes, then he asked me to take dictation. The message went to General Eisenhower. General, I have received Field Marshal Montgomery's request that General Patton be relieved for an unauthorized Rhine crossing. After careful review, I must decline to support this request. General Patton's operation, while uncoordinated, was successful and advances
agli objectives i recommend no action
be taken. Churchill paused before signing. Then he added a handwritten postscript. I keep Patton moving. We cannot match his speed, but we cannot afford to lose it. That evening Churchill met privately with his physician Lord Moran. Moran's diary records what Churchill said when he believed no one important was listening. The Prime Minister looked drained. He poured a whiskey and said, I have chosen American results over British pride. Montgomery will never forgive me. The military establishment will be furious. But watching Patton cross that river, while we prepared our elaborate display, forced me to accept something terrible. We are no longer the leading military power in this alliance. We haven't been for some time. I was simply too proud to admit it. Moran asked if Churchill regretted the choice. Churchill answered immediately, not for a moment. Pride does not win wars. Speed does. Patton understands that. Montgomery does not, and if I must choose between a general who protects British prestige and one who ends this war faster, I choose the man who brings our boys home. But there was more. Churchill continued, and this is what makes this moment so important. Bernard demanded Patton be dismissed for insubordination. And he was right. Patton ignored command structure. He violated protocol. In any proper military, he would face punishment. But Bernard fails to understand this is not a proper military. This is a coalition of competing national interests where the nation with the greatest resources sets the rules, and that nation is no longer Britain, it is America. Moran recorded Churchill's next words exactly. I spent this war pretending we were equal partners with the Americans. Today I admitted the truth. They are the senior partner. Now they provide the majority of men, material, and leadership. Patton crossed first because American military doctrine has surpassed ours, not in courage, not in training, but in the willingness to move faster than caution allows. That is the future of warfare, and we no longer lead it. The impact of Churchill's decision echoed through Allied command. Montgomery never forgave him. Their relationship, once warm, became distant and formal. British military leaders felt betrayed. The chiefs of staff sent a formal protest stating that failure to discipline Patton weakened all command authority. Churchill's reply was direct. Would you rather I demand his removal and watch the Americans ignore me? That would damage British authority far more than this quiet acceptance. Yet the consequences went beyond bruised egos. By refusing Montgomery's demand, Churchill signaled to American commanders that success would be rewarded even when protocol was broken. Patton understood at once. After learning of Churchill's decision, he wrote in his diary, the British finally realize this is our war. Now we will finish it our way. The final judgment appeared in Churchill's memoirs. Years later, in Volume 6, he devoted an entire chapter to the Rhine crossings. He wrote, General Patton's crossing at Oppenheim proved that modern warfare rewards speed over preparation. Field Marshal Montgomery's Operation Plunder was a triumph of planning, but Patton's improvised assault achieved the same goal in a single night with far fewer resources. The contrast was revealing, and For those of us who defended British methods uncomfortable. Yet, in a private letter to President Eisenhower in 1953, Churchill was more candid. IQ once asked if I regretted not backing Montgomery's demand to dismiss Patton. The answer is no. Patton won the race to the Rhine. He helped end the war sooner. He saved lives by moving so quickly the Germans could not organize a defense. Was he insubordinate? Absolutely. Was he necessary? More than I wished to admit. What Churchill said when Montgomery demanded Patton be removed revealed the hardest lesson of coalition warfare. Sometimes you must choose between the general who makes you proud and the general who ends the war faster. Churchill chose speed. He chose results. He chose to accept that British military methods, however professional, had been overtaken by American operational tempo. In doing so, he acknowledged a truth Britain had avoided since 1942. The empire that once defined military excellence was no longer setting the pace. It was struggling to keep up. Montgomery wanted Patton punished for breaking rules. Churchill understood Patton had exposed an uncomfortable reality in modern war. The side that moves fastest wins, and Britain could no longer move fast.